Welcome all. I'm joined by attorney and advisor at the Center for Law and Justice at the Tatoyan Foundation, Mr. Garo Ghazarian, who many of you will recognize from the Frontlines show with Karnik Kerkonyan. So Garo Ghazarian, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I want to start off by talking about this fact-finding mission to Syunik. Syunik is the southernmost region in Armenia, and when Azerbaijan's major attack on Armenia took place in mid-September, Syunik was heavily targeted. Can you first explain what was the purpose of the visit and what you saw in Syunik?
Thank you for the question. First of all, Syunik has been under attack, as far as I'm concerned, for over a year now. An attack does not have to be a daily exchange of gunfire, or rather one-sided gunfire, as we have come to know from the Azeri side, but rather the presence, the ongoing presence of Azeri soldiers in close proximity to schools, to roads, is something that, while unnerving when you look at it from a distance, as we had, Karnik Kerkonyan and I, we wanted to take a closer look and to get a sense of how is the average villager, the average resident in the region surviving, existing, and is there any possibility for such a person to thrive? What we discovered was shocking. Was shocking in such a sense that we were at schools, various villages, where right across the school, in a very small hilltop, you not only see the Azeri military posts, but you see the Azeri soldier. You can look in the eyelids and see the pupils of that soldier in such close proximity to an Armenian school, to a road, to a village, to a home. We were in one home, specifically in Nerkinhand, where the entire time there were menacing movements and looks in our direction. But I must say, the Armenian in Syunik is a resilient Armenian, is an incredibly resilient Armenian. And what is most telling now is that we have found it, based on our research and in consultations with the authorities in Artsakh Republic, that the region in Syunik is far more dangerous for the average resident of each and every one of these border adjacent villages, because there's just absolutely no security buffer. We're not talking about simply invading Armenia Republic territory. We're talking the close proximity to the roads. I mean, the roads. And in talking with the regional leaders of the various communities in Goris, in Kapan, it became very evident to us that it's impossible to maintain that day-to-day lifestyle long-term, yet they have maintained it. And they are very glued to their land, to our homeland. But something has to give. Something has to give. When we hear about efforts to reach a peace treaty, I question, how can we reach a peace treaty without an immediate fundamental precondition of the removal or withdrawal of these enemy forces from such close proximity to our folks?
And you spoke a bit about the resilience of the residents of Syunik. I'm wondering what they were saying to you. What were their concerns? What was their reactions?
Well, they're saying we're not leaving. In fact, one of the gentlemen in the specific home, right across a very, very small valley, where on the other side there's another Armenian home now that is now occupied, and a base has been erected there by the Azeri army, and a short distance away from it, you could see them building roads, massive, wide roads, coming from unoccupied, deserted hillsides. But you wonder, where is that road leading to? That road is leading to the Armenian village and beyond, heaven forbid. But the gentleman said, not only I am staying here, but I have done everything in my power to bring 9 people who are now working in the fields there. But you have to ask yourself, any moment, as we have come to see in the past, in the not so distant past, any one of those individuals' life can be taken away from him or her because they are literally within a stone throw away from these forces. When we were looking at them, to have a closer idea, just with your own cell phone, you can just zoom in. You don't even need a binoculars. You can zoom in, and the person is holding the weapon, but at the same time, with the other hand, he's making gestures like this. The person that we met with, and the 9 or so folks that were working there, I could not leave. I felt very guilty leaving the location and looking back where they remained. There's no water. Water's been cut off. There's no electricity. They seem to be bringing in waters. When I wanted to wash my hands, they opened a small bottle and poured it onto my palm of my hand, if you will. I went in and visited the bathroom. There's no hot water, let alone water. It's just been brought over. But they're there, and they're working to the best of their ability. It's the survival instinct that has kept us going for thousands of years. But for the love of God, I think those of us in the diaspora, those of us in Yerevan even, fine, we should go on with our lives, but we should not go on with our lives when the room next door in your home, so to speak, can be taken over any minute. Because if the room next door, and that's what Syunik is, it's the room next door, if that region falls, heaven forbid, you're that much closer. You're that much closer to the heat, to the firepower, if you will.
And do you think, for example, as you mentioned, erecting a military post by a school, or like in Nerkinhand, where there are reports that almost 4 incursions have taken place by Azerbaijani forces moving towards the village, is part of an intentional strategy by Azerbaijan? And what is Azerbaijan's strategy?
Clearly, Azerbaijan's strategy is to drive away the residents who have been in those villages for many, many, many years. You referenced Nerkinhand. Nerkinhand, the hillside, because it's in a valley, the hillside that is immediately adjacent is littered with Azeri posts. Not 1, not 2, not 3, littered. And if you take a closer look with the aid of binoculars, you see that those posts are not just shacks. They are solid posts with quite a few personnel, and you wonder what's behind the hillside that you cannot see with your naked eye or with the aid of binoculars. And there is movement nonstop. And I was informed by the chief of the village that what they do on a regular basis is they shoot their firearms, their machine guns, so that you are constantly in a state of distress. There's a cemetery, which we looked at from very, very close proximity. And the village chief, when I asked him if there were relatives who were resting, obviously not in peace at this moment, he said, yes, my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, my nephew, and I haven't been able to go there for the last several weeks to tend to the gravesite, and I have gone close enough to see that they go in and out of there, God knows, to do what in the cemetery.
And obviously a lot of information and evidence was collected on this fact-finding mission. Will it be used in any way? What will it be used for?
Yes, the entire purpose of it was to be used in litigation. Karni Kirkonyan, co-host and colleague on Frontlines, as you already know, is an international lawyer of great reputation. He was part of the ICJ team last fall. In cooperation with the Tatoyan Foundation is doing incredible work, and that is why Carnegie and I are committed and devoted to assist in those endeavors. And Mr. Tatoyan was with us as well. He was the one actually that was able to take us to the places, otherwise we would be, quite frankly, lost in that terrain. And all of the places, you know, I look back and I recall as early as May of 2021, when Mr. Tatoyan was speaking. At the time he was the human rights defender, and he was talking about the imperative of national security, of the buffer, for whatever reason, whether it is failed diplomacy or difference of priorities, if you will. I'm amazed that 15 months later, those forces are still there, and according to the head of the Kapan region, they have even advanced, and they continue to advance bit by bit, inch by inch, if you will.
And there are, you know, numerous teams working on this. There's a Center for Truth and Justice. There's a Tatoyan Foundation. Yes. Gathering evidence. Why, for Armenian legal teams around the world, it's so important, these databases that are gathering evidence in this way?
Excellent question, because in order for diplomacy to succeed, it needs to have, in our opinion, fundamental legal bases. And the fundamental legal bases are established and achieved through courts. Through courts, you achieve justice. Now, implementing it, you cannot enforce, for example, an ICJ opinion cannot be enforceable by military intervention. The ICJ does not have its own army, if you will. However, those outcomes, those decisions must be used, and they're invaluable in diplomacy. But they have to be in-your-face diplomacy on a daily basis. You will see in the weeks ahead, in the days and weeks ahead, on our platform Frontlines, which we are fortunate to have CivilNet share it as well and broadcast it to your wide audience, you will see vignettes and special selected portions of our trip where we have interacted with the locals. We have shown not our defensive positions, but rather the invading offensive positions. For example, the Kapan Airport. The Kapan Airport, you stand there, the runway is right there, and right across from it, real close proximity, you have so many Azeri posts, some small, some not so small. And we're going to show all of that in the hopes that the masses in the diaspora, and why not the masses in the homeland as well, recognize and understand that those who live in those regions, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their economic stature or the lack thereof, they are Armenians, and the enemy is not going to distinguish what political party or what mode of forward progress you think is the best way to go forward for our nation after 2020.
And finally, I want to ask you, as an attorney, obviously there's been a lot of talk about the International Court of Justice, the European Court of Human Rights, the International Criminal Court even now, and whether Armenia should ratify the Rome Statute. There is a perception, however, or skepticism towards international law and whether it can really bring results to the Armenian side, considering that Azerbaijan doesn't abide really by any of the rulings of international courts.
Well, let's look back post Second World War. Many of the achievements that the Israeli government, the Jewish people, reached were through such tribunals, if you will. I remain entirely convinced that incredible wealth of weapons of law, of justice, are on the table for us to utilize. You cannot simply negotiate from a position of weakness. And information is power. And credible information is even more so powerful. The power is in the information. The information is the fuel for legal proceedings. And in turn, the success in legal proceedings is the impetus that diplomacy must be based on. National security that is clearly violated by international standards of human rights, by international standards of right to travel, all of which have been infringed upon to this very minute by the Azerbaijani government, cannot go ignored and unanswered. From the United Nations to the European Union and the International Courts of Justice, and yes, why not, the International Criminal Court, all of them should be targeted by information that should not be left to be ignored and only dealt with by the average Armenian man or woman or child. We went to a school and there were 17 children there that were studying, yet within perhaps not even 200 meters, I got out of the car and I walked and it said, "Welcome to Azerbaijan." And that kind of holding of one's mind and emotions hostage on a day-to-day basis is contrary to every norm of international law.
Well, Garo Ghazarian, insightful as always. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And you can catch the Frontlines show with Garo Ghazarian and Karni Kerkonian on CivilNet platforms as well. Thank you for joining us on CivilNet.